Disclaimer, the views and opinions expressed during this podcast episode are those of the co-host and guest and not their sponsoring institutions. Now let's start the show. So, hello, Detroit and the world. Welcome to another episode of Authentically Detroit, broadcasting live from the Audio Wave Network studios, or actually from our Zoom studios inside the Stoudemire Wellness Hub, sponsored by the Ford Foundation and now a content partner to bridgedetroit.com. I'm Donna Givens-Davidson, and Orlando is off handling a personal matter and will be back with us next episode. So thank you for listening in and supporting our efforts to build a platform of authentic voices for real people on the east side of Detroit. We want you to like, rate, and subscribe to our podcast on all platforms. We drop a new episode every week, so be sure to turn on those notifications. So a couple of weeks ago, I started seeing posts all over social media of 12 Black Detroiters running around Paris, living their best lives. I actually thought of the song in Watch the Throne. Inwards in Paris, Detroit began to murmur and question, how did all these Detroiters end up in Paris, France at the exact same time? And what exactly are they doing there? It was Lauren Hood and her new Institute for Afro-Urbanism that's responsible for curating that Parisian excursion with some of Detroit's brightest talent. Here to talk about the Institute for Afro-Urbanism and the Parisian excursion in search of Black thriving is the founder and CEO of the Institute, Lauren Hood. Lauren, welcome back to Authentically Detroit.
Thanks,
also
Donna.
Joining us is Alan Penniman. Alan is an urban planner and designer and serves as the head of the East Region with Detroit's Planning and Development Department. His ambition is to marry design excellence and social impact to foster redevelopment in Detroit that is both equitable and inspiring. He was also on that famed trip to Paris. Alan Penniman. So I struggle with your name a little bit. Welcome back to Authentically Detroit.
All right. Thank you very much. What's up, everybody?
Hey, so we're excited to have you on the East Side, Alan. I know you've done some work on the East Side, but now you're the head of the work. So before we get started, let's talk about how everybody's doing. I'm going to dig into that as well as this Institute for Afro-Urbanism a little more. How are you doing today? How does the day find you? I was telling Lauren earlier, I'm feeling a little low energy myself. How are you, Lauren?
Same, it's the end of the year, it's the holidays, but it's also like dark at 4:00 and we're in the gray season. So it's just, I too am low energy. I'm with you. I feel that.
How about you, Alan?
Ooh, yeah, I feel it. I mean, there's a lot to be discouraged about. So I think it's always good to try to tap into that radical positivity or radical joy and try to raise up all the blessings. At least that's what I'm trying to do because, yeah, it's a little bleak out there, but, we're going to get through it.
Absolutely. My low energy is just that in January of every year, I have all of these ideas of things I want to do, and they're all going to happen by December, and then December comes. And it's like, oh, you got to do all of these things that you said you're going to do. At one point, we had something planned. I think I worked Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. And then, I worked Wednesday, and these are all evening meetings or whatever. And so it's like, when do I have a weekend? Do I remember to schedule downtime and self-care time? So one of my New Year's resolutions is to schedule self-care, like I schedule everything else.
Yes. Yeah. Hey, if that's what you got to do, block it out.
Mm-hmm.
That's important.
Yeah. So you say it's a bleak time. What do you mean? You're meaning Omicron or something else?
Well, there's that. I was thinking of the state of our democracy in particular. But I think that's a different episode. So let me not bring that stress into the space.
It's okay to bring it up. Listen, this is the way I see it. I'm reading these books. My class is on 20th century Detroit, 21st century Detroit, really trying to help my students understand Detroit. So in my downtime, I'm reading about it, and I'm thinking about the 1967 riot, however. And So when you look at what happened just prior to 1967, people think people were just fed up and they finally exploded into this rebellion, right? But the first thing happened was people's expectations were raised, and then the government didn't deliver. Mayor Kavanaugh was a reformer. He was considered a progressive liberal who was going to change the system. And you had all of these people promising change. You had civil rights acts being passed. And yet people in Detroit were still struggling with the same problems on the job, with the police force, with housing. And it exploded into something, but that was partially due, at least in part, because people wanted more. Do you think that right now the average constituent just wants more from their government? And do you think that there's a possibility that we will demand some type of revolutionary change? I'm not necessarily saying armed revolution, but electoral revolution.
Yes, that's a great parallel to draw. I think, with the Biden presidency and having, the House and the Senate, I think expectations were raised. Also, with the uprisings of 2020, there's a sense of like, we've had enough, no more incremental reform. We want sweeping change. And a lot of people put a lot of work to get a 50-50 Senate and all that. So yeah, I do feel like there was a sense of optimism, especially post 45, that is now being dashed in a lot of ways. And that makes it extra hard to swallow, because we're so close to very substantial sweeping changes, but we're not getting there.
But 10 years ago, nobody was talking about a $15 minimum wage. Nobody was talking about Medicare for all or free college. Nobody was talking about student debt cancellation. And Senator Bernie Sanders kind of put it all out there. And you had people really saying, hey, we want this. We got $15 unemployment benefits, but we can't get $15 jobs. You know what I mean? So I think that the expectations are also raised by some of the political organizing that's taken place, where people are unafraid to really demand what they want from government, whether it is, I'm not even going to say defunding the police. I'm just going to say reorganizing our city budget so that we're not spending all of our money on the police, however you do it, reform, restructure, whatever. But I think there's this dialogue out there that exists right now that did not exist 10 years ago. And that's part of that raised expectation. And people who are my age, and I'm 58, have a tendency to sometimes get frustrated like that. Like, what do you expect government to do? We ought to be just glad that we get just vote,
But that's not good enough.
It's not, right?
LBJ, FDR, right? Like, they had their flaws, but government was, sending people to the moon. We did Tennessee Valley administration. We had the New Deal. Government was where the best talent went, and it was the institution that at least was thought to solve problems, at least for a subset of the population. But it just was capable of doing so much more.
Yeah. What say you, Lauren?
I think that people need to think themselves worthy before they will demand more. So I want to, at least locally, help Black Detroiters know that we are worthy of more, so that we will be encouraged to get out and ask for more. Because the things I hear people asking for in meetings, I'm like, that's it? That's it? We are worthy of and deserve it of so much more. And some of it needs to come in the form of reparations. We just need to raise the bar. And I think the bar starts from within. You have to think that you're worth more before you start demanding more. So that's where I think we need to start. I
love it. I would give you we used to have a bell, and I'd be ringing that bell on that, right? Because we absolutely, when you deserve more, when you demand more, that is sometimes when you get more. I think, though, that people also have to understand there's power in us, that we can't always look to other people for our power. We have to figure out how to maximize the power that we have. I see people who are doing things like Malik Yakini rarely asks permission. He's just out there doing stuff. And I see freedom and Mama Shoe. And it's like, to some extent, we need to demand more of other people. To some extent, we need to demand more of ourselves so that we can be as empowered as we can with the resources that we have.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Yeah, let's raise the bar.
On all levels. We had an episode on power building with building the engine. I think it was last week or the week before last. I can't remember. I can't get my week straight, but we did a show on building the engine. And the day before that, it was one of the second to last session in my class was on building community power. And so Orlando was our guest speaker, and he talked about building narrative power, the power of narrative and reframing narrative, because that's how people understand their worth. But I think also narrative helps people understand possibilities. Like I can think I'm worth a whole lot and not believe that the government is going to give me a whole lot. So I lowered my expectations of the government, believing that the government does not have the will to help me.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and in this time, like who expects the government to do a lot on behalf of the people, right? I think over time, our expectations have been reduced too much. And that's why, 2020 and this past year feel a little different, because suddenly we are demanding more. We're respecting ourselves and our lives and demanding more from our government and thinking about, what it would mean to have a social safety net or a jobs program, to cancel college debt, to actually do something about the climate. Suddenly there seems to be like an Overton window opening where you could do these things. And then, certain senator from a certain place is shutting that down. And, here we are going back to expecting too little from our government.
So maybe we get a third party next time. Maybe that's what is finally what ignites a third party movement is people getting their student loan bills in the mail and saying, I'm not doing this. I think that people are less consenting and less willing to just go along, I think. When we came back to work, people didn't go back into $7 an hour jobs. They had to raise the bar. I think that people's expectations have changed. I'm going to be optimistic and try to end this year believing that we're not going to go gently into that good night and just go back to where we were. We're going to make some demands here. And some of you all went to Paris to figure out exactly what we need to be demanding. So I want to get to that. But before we do, we have this new segment, Hot Takes, where we run down some of the week's top headlines in the city of Detroit. And of course, number one is Whitmer urges vaccination as the state braces for Omicron. This is in the Detroit News. What is your take on that?
Urges?
Yeah.
She's just urging. It's not a requirement. She's just urging. My take is that she fears another kidnapping threat. I feel like she probably wants to do something a little bit more, to hold people a little more accountable, make them more responsible for the general public's well-being, but I feel like there might be some fear there. And maybe not even fear for her own well-being, but fear of her being able to maintain her position, right? I don't know. With what's going on in the world, urging seems a little soft. And coming from a place, so just not to get all the way into France, but when we were there, you had to have an app that had your testing status and your vaccination status in it. So when you would go and sit down in some place, someone comes around and scans the app on your phone to see if you've been vaccinated or tested. So that's, seeing that up close, like a place that takes the virus really seriously. And then to come back here and just to have people be all flippant about it. Like I was looking at Michigan stats in the airport on my way back home, and we were like the top state for new cases. So when you hear that, like the governor's just, urging, like, I think we need something more serious, but I understand her position.
For me, this is an example of the influence of the Republican Party dragging down public health. What I'm trying to say is, the reality of governing in a swing state means that you have to take into consideration, a good chunk of the electorate who is falling prey to Republican fear-mongering and conspiracy theory. And that means you are inhibited to enact the public health orders that should be enacted, i.e. vaccine mandates. But because of Republicans, that is, there's a political cost to doing something like that. And because of that, people will be exposed and unsafe and lives will be put at risk. And I think that's disgusting.
So who likes vaccines less? Republicans or Black people?
Well, if you just look at the case race right now, the Those that are the most impacted are white Republican men. Those are the highest cases, highest hospitalizations, highest deaths.
But who likes vaccines less, Republicans or Black people?
I don't
Because
think that Republicans dislike the vaccines. I think that group of people dislikes being told what to do. I think we are less trusting of government and medical professionals given our history with those bodies. But I really think the Republicans and those constituents just don't like being told what to do, whether it's a vaccine or whether it's stay home.
Well, I think it's bigger than that, because they definitely like to tell women like what to do with their wombs, and and even with birth control. I mean, it's also very selective. I think that it's almost like you followed Donald Trump down the rabbit hole a little bit, and you got to go all the way. If Donald Trump had not convinced people that the vaccine wasn't real and it was a China virus, and he hadn't convinced people of all these lies, they wouldn't have this need to hang on to the falsehoods that he perpetuated. I just feel as though there's this commitment. You're going to go all the way. And of course, people don't like being told what to do. But I guess my thing about Whitmer is I think a big portion of her constituency on the Democratic side is also opposed to vaccine mandates. I was in our office and the health department was coming in and they were doing testing. They were doing weekly testing for us for COVID when we started back to work full time. And I'm listening to some of the people who are from the Detroit Health Department standing there complaining about vaccine mandates and how nobody can tell them what to do with their body. These are Detroit Health Department employees. So, and they were Black. Okay, let me be clear. They were us. We did a focus group, actually 2 focus groups last year, where we brought people together. And I would not allow myself to sit in the focus groups because I was so afraid that my expressions would give me away and I might lose it. So I was like, I haven't even read or listened to the transcripts, but I know they're bad. And when I say they're bad, there's so much misinformation, so much mistrust, so much, the disinformation does not stop on the Republican side. It's become a national problem to me. So it started with the Republicans, but it is now us, Americans of all different stripes and ages and races. You hear the craziest things.
The vaccine is safe. There's been plenty of time for skeptical folks to wait and see. Everybody knows somebody that's got the vaccine. We know, okay, the day after you might feel a little out of it. We understand that. We understand the effects on, menstruation and all that stuff. There's been plenty of time to let other people be the guinea pigs, and it's perfectly safe. So I think we just need to work to combat that misinformation and these attitudes that it's just about being told what to do. It's actually about your family and your community. It's not just a personal choice. So I don't know. I'm out of patience for those attitudes. I think we really need to work hard to get folks to think about the public good here, public health.
I have a 4-year-old granddaughter, and until they can come up with a vaccine for 4-year-olds, I stand there with my fingers crossed because she's a 4-year-old child who can't be vaccinated. And, there's children all over the United States in that status. And so right now, the question is, do you send her into a Head Start or into a daycare center where she's going to be possibly exposed and more unsafe, because we know that schools and centers are unsafe. And that's a question parents all over have to ask as they come up with alternative ways to care for children. And not everybody can. So I think it would be nice if we had more than urging, if we made some demands. The federal government has said large employers have to do it. And I think even as a smaller employer, we have to decide organizationally what we're going to do in the new year. And what employees we're going to be willing to risk losing, because there will be a couple of people I know who will not comply. Anyway, the next question is about the Supreme Court ordering the release of the redistricting panel's secret work, and that's in Bridge, Detroit. What do you think about that?
What did it say?
Well, the redistricting panel had some meetings with their attorneys to discuss civil rights compliance and to figure out, what they had to do to comply with civil rights. It was a closed session meeting where they received that advice from the attorney, and they received memos from these attorneys. They refused to release that. So Attorney General Dana Nessel said that basically she believed they were in violation of the Michigan Open Meetings Law and they needed to release it. And their attorney said, no, don't let them make you do that. Don't release it. And there was this thing about attorney-client privilege. So the Michigan Supreme Court voted in a 4-3 decision that they had to release not just the recording, but also the transcripts and some of the memos, not all of the memos. Those that were strictly legal, they don't have to release. And it was interesting because the decision was really made with one progressive and 3 conservative Supreme Court members. So it seems as though, on the one hand, it was there. On the other hand, the Detroit News, Bridge, Michigan, and other news outlets sued for the release of that information, believing that secrecy is a harm to government. So I haven't been able to read what's in those memos or listen to the kind of advice that was being given, but I think it's important that we understand the logic behind drawing maps that are going to reduce probably the number of Black seats at Congress, state Senate, and state House.
Okay, I'll go. Okay. It's a beautiful thing that we have an independent citizens redistricting committee. I wish that every state had that. And the irony for me is that we're operating in basically, this is a street fight for democracy, and having a fair independent, multi-party redistricting commission is actually a liability in the arena that we're fighting in. If you look at what's happening in Texas and in Georgia and in Florida and other places. So yeah, of course we should be transparent and there should be no hiding of the maps or the memos around the maps. And so I should just shout out voters, not politicians. They're the ones who really got us to this point. So shout out voters, not politicians. And, I wish we were in a more ideal world where every state had what we had, but I'm also thinking my God, we need to, gerrymander to the Democratic advantage because we need every vote we can get.
Yeah, that's going to be difficult just because of how Democrats tend to be clustered in urban areas and Republicans are in a lot of the far-flung areas. So I think map drawing is difficult. I struggle a little bit with the issues there because on the one hand, we have fewer Black districts, and on the other hand, Detroit has lost population and more Black people live outside of Detroit. So we're not in these concentrated gerrymandered spaces that we used to be in. We used to be redlined into a single community where you could have more representation, but at the same time, that representation did not always equal power. The question is, how do you have power at the state level where your vote and your voice has influence? Because even under the old maps, we had all this influence. Was it 60% of Black people in the state of Michigan at one time were living under emergency management? That didn't look powerful to me. It looked like the opposite of power. And so I think it's a good thing that they're releasing it, though. I don't think that we need the precedence of people being able to make these decisions, even though I, shout out to Voters Not Politicians for bringing this about, but I don't want the precedent to be that you go in the closed doors and talk about civil rights, especially. But the Voters Not Politicians is also changing their name. I think they have this new voting project where they're really fighting for voting rights in the state of Michigan and trying to fight against the current petition drive. So I also appreciate them shifting course and moving in this new direction. Anyway, that wraps up hot takes. If you have pieces that you want to discuss. Oh, I'm sorry. Were you going to say something, Lauren?
I'm just thinking how little I don't know, it might sound really ignorant, just am not following politics right now. I'm into my emotional and spiritual growth and self-reflection. And there are just certain things that aren't making it into my mental and spiritual sphere.
No, I think that there's That's what some people do. And we need everybody at every level, right? Because it's politics. But if we put all of our balls in the political basket, we're sunk. Because our politics in this nation are really crappy, and they've always been crappy. Donald Trump did not mess up this nation. Neither did the modern GOP. Show me a time in history where we were really doing well and where we had all of our rights. And, come on now.
Maybe that's why I just don't have a lot of faith that our real problems will get solved in that arena. So I can't.
That's all right, Lauren. We all have our own lane. Not everyone has to be like super involved in politics.
Totally.
Yeah. I mean, I think that you're right, Alan. We all have our own lane. We do need people fighting for certain things. And that's really when I look at power building, I look at everybody really functioning really well in their own lane and understanding their purpose and where they are strong. As long as you are acting in your purpose and you're fighting a good fight, it doesn't have to be my fight, vice versa. Yes. That's really what makes the world go around. It makes the world interesting to me. That's why I'm so excited to talk about our discussion today. That wraps up hot takes. If you have pieces that you want discussed on Authentically Detroit, you can hit us up on our socials at Authentically Detroit on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Or you can email us at authenticallydetroit@gmail.com. For our feature discussion this week, we are talking to Lauren and Alan about the Institute of Afro-Urbanism and why they chose to search for Black thriving in Paris. So Lauren, can you tell us about the Institute for Afro-Urbanism and what it's supposed to accomplish? Tell us about your lane.
It's really like the same lane that I've been on, but it's a platform that is ground up instead of being top down. I feel like I had been trying to fit myself into other folks' frameworks for how Detroit should move into the future. But instead of, trying to fit my round self into a square hole, I just built a different kind of shape around me. But the Institute for Afro-Urbanism really just centers the culture into the work of future building. I feel like even though we're an 80% Black city, it is still really hard for lots of people to say Black. And even beyond just saying Black, to really advocate for the needs and wants, and even for the voice of Black folks to be heard. It should not be that difficult for Black folks to be heard in these processes where we're determining the future of Black communities. So I just put the Afro right in front of the urbanism so you know what you're getting. And I really feel like every cultural group should have their own kind of urbanism that really lifts up things that are beautiful and amazing and specific to that culture. So Afro-urbanism seeks to do that.
Can I just ring another bell? I love the fact that you're centering it on Blackness. I think so often we don't center Blackness. We say Black and brown, Black and brown, Black. I don't have to represent everybody. They get to represent themselves. Okay, I can't even represent other cultures because I don't know enough about them. People have to represent themselves. But there is nothing wrong with us centering Blackness in the Blackest city in the United States with some of the most amazing Black history in the history of this nation. And yet we don't want to use the word. People have convinced us Black is a bad word. People will tell me I don't see Black. But I want you to see it. I want you to see it. It's not something that I'm ashamed of. It's not something ugly. It's beautiful, right? And it's
well, lots of people are though, Donna. And I'm outing myself here. Like I was socialized in such a way that I, for a long time, maybe wasn't ashamed of my Blackness, but I certainly wasn't proud of it. Mm-hmm. And I feel like I don't want anybody else to have to go through that. I feel like what I internalized was in order to be what is conventionally accepted as successful, that I needed to suppress certain aspects of my cultural heritage. And I'm really trying to make sure that nobody else has to do that. And just that writ large, we understand that we all lose when we have to suppress aspects of our cultural being.
And this is coming from another Mercy girl, right?
Yes, and also even worse, Country Day for grade school. So like from a very early age, there was like, I don't know, you just weren't allowed to like lean into your Blackness. We were all assimilating. And, I don't want to, vilify folks who've had to do that for social survival. But, as an adult where I can make my own choices about it, I can look at it in a way and think about the ways that I missed out because I had to distance myself from the culture. Sorry, Alan, you were about to say something. Go ahead.
Well, when I'm in conversations about urbanism and folks are afraid to say Black or they say to me, that's an expression of colorblind culture or like a colorblind framework. And that should not exist. That needs to go, especially in a place like Detroit, like where we do need to be pro-Black and serve the Black community that lives here. Like,
yeah, I look at color blindness as erasure, right? Because you're not seeing me, you're seeing yourself in me, which means that I don't exist. And I remember I used to feel sometime when I was young, even when I walked down the halls of Mercy, like the invisible woman, people wouldn't speak, people would not acknowledge my presence. I'm here. And then I went to U of M and people looked away when they saw me. And I learned this, the invisible man, even before I read the book, just sort of rang true to me. Like, I feel invisible.
Well, I feel like that on the streets of downtown now sometimes. Don't you feel that?
Yeah.
I can't decide what is worse, if it's like being sized up, like to see if I belong somewhere in the city I grew up in, or if it's like looking through me or past me, like you say, as if I'm invisible. Like both are bad, but I mean, I feel both of them on a semi-regular basis.
But it's also an expression of commitment to this preposterous myth of egalitarian society and a post-racial society, which obviously is not true. And so, sorry if I'm getting ahead of myself, but for me, Paris was fascinating to see how France does colorblind versus how the United States does colorblind. Here we're, trying to erase history or to rewrite it, to whitewash it, that type of thing. Whereas in France, there's a similar construct of like, well, you're either French or you're not French. There's no race, right? There's no census that says I'm Algerian French, I'm Senegalese French. It's like, no, I'm either native born French or I'm an immigrant. And that to me is super fascinating. Because of course there are racial constructs and hierarchies there, but there's that similar commitment, at least on the surface, to université, right? To a universal France, until all of a sudden, we have, Black folks taking up space in France, or until we have, a woman wearing a hijab or, practicing a religion other than Catholicism, then all of a sudden it's, French for the French and that type of thing. So super fascinating to see just that contrasting colorblindness there versus here.
So when I was in college and I was, I probably could have minored. I didn't claim a minor in Black studies or African American studies, but I certainly took enough classes to do so. And I read a book by Aimé Césaire, who was one of the people who influenced Frantz Fanon. And,
yes.
It really speaking to the impact of colonialism on the relationship of France to both island and to continental African people. And so I think the difference has been largely that the United States is settler colonialism, and France was not settler colonialism. So therefore, they brought us into space that they came to, and the people they enslaved are already with them. Whereas in France, they were sort of like overseas, and we'll let some of y'all in at a time. But it's this difference.
That's such an important observation. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and Aimé Césaire and Fanon were big themes of this trip. We talked a lot about La Negritude. And yeah, also sorry for my terrible French pronunciations.
It got better.
I was that annoying tourist who was trying. I was like, oh, je voudrais le café, s'il vous plaît.
I had 4 years of French in high school, and I'm not much better. It's like I just unlearned all of that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, tell me about the trip. What did you learn? What was the Frantz Fanon? You talked about Frantz Fanon. You talked about Aimé Césaire. They have certainly influenced my African-centered belief system, right? I mean, especially Aimé Césaire is just like a king to me. I was reading this when I was in college, and I was like, wow. When he said the beast, the the beast becomes the beast, or the man who what I remember about Aimé Césaire was this construct where people who treat people like beasts become beasts themselves. And he made the very provocative statement that the Holocaust was the beast turning onto itself. And that really lit, I was like, oh my goodness. I was like Malcolm X and the chickens coming home to roost, right?
Exactly, yes.
They had these moments where every Black person was like, yes. And white people were like, oh my goodness, unless you're politically correct and you're like, I can't believe he said that. So
yes, absolutely. Yeah, and I'll just layer in, I think your observation, the contrast between a settler colonial state versus an extractive colonial state, where, I won't attempt to quote Fanon because he said him so much more eloquently than me, but, generally the sentiment that like, as you go to a place like Paris and marvel at the Louvre and the Pantheon and all of these wonderful buildings and all the, the metro and all this stuff, that is built on the extraction and the enslavement of an entire continent. And what, I don't know the answer to this, but like what does that mean for somebody who is born in a French colony and then goes to school at the Sorbonne or becomes part of a French identity? There's like a bit of paternalism baked into that, which I think was striking for me, this idea that, France has a tradition of educating, citizens from the colonies, and even in some cases, them becoming governors of that colony or even like members of parliament, but, only to a token degree as a way of demonstrating France's, universal,
egalitarian.
All that stuff. But like, it's how deep does it run? It seemed like there was a limit to it, and it was part of it was for show.
And so Laura, this trip was your idea.
Yeah.
What was your thinking when you were?
I was going to talk about the origins of it were around the pantheonization of Josephine Baker. So I was fascinated by the fact that this Black American woman was about to be put into this monument where France puts all of its like poets and war heroes and, other luminaries. Like, why was this Black American woman going into this space? So I wanted to answer that question. I wanted to understand, like, how did French folks feel about that? Like, what was the opinion of French citizens about this Black American woman going into this monument? And to your point a minute ago, Alan, a lot of it did seem very showy. There was like a giant red carpet. There were, giant images of her. They were playing her music. And I was standing next to Cantrell when President Marcon was speaking. So I had like an instant translator. So I was like, what is he saying? And he was just shaking his head. He would say things like Josephine Baker wasn't a Black woman, like she was a French woman first, like saying things like, just, it was more about, like he said, about being French first than it was about her race. And I was like, she would not be happy with that. That is not what she would want to stand for or be recognized for. But it was, we organized a trip around this pantheonization, but also exploring the concept of Black thriving. It is my contention that in Detroit, we talk so much about the ways in which we are suffering in our deficits, but what does the landscape of community development look like if we center Black thriving is like the to be attained goal. So what is Black thriving? So my theory is that it has three components. It's like agency, like your capacity to affect change in your own life. Abundance, like, do you accept that it's okay to have? And that doesn't just mean money, but like to be abundant in your relationships, to have work that brings you joy and is fulfilling. And then audacity, like, do you have the gall to go after the things that you really want? To lean into your imagination, to take risks. Like, do you have audacity? That's the third step. And I believe if you have all of those things, then you can be Black and thriving. But the trip was around looking at like, what do Black French folks What do they do to activate those three things in their lives as citizens and just as like representatives of the Black diaspora? What I learned is like, I have friends that are African in Detroit, but I still felt like there was kind of a divide. But when we were over there, I felt really connected to the diasporic Africans the immigrants who had come from other African countries who were living there. I don't know, I just felt a closeness and a level of understanding that I don't necessarily feel with those Africans in Detroit. I don't know why that is, but I felt much closer to those that were there. We also talked to a Detroit expat who was living in France. So Jeff Mills, you maybe remember the Wizard on the radio in your day? Maybe not. Anyway, he's a world-renowned DJ. He was on the radio, yes, but then he went to France and did all these amazing things. And just to have him talk about, what it meant to be Black and be from Detroit, the value of being a master in your field and why certain people choose France as a place to go and explore that. He talked about how I understand artisan culture now because of what he shared. Like, people go there to be really good at doing a certain thing, which is why you have an artisan, like everything there. Like, somebody's making belt buckles, somebody's making, I don't know, paper clips, but they're all like really good at what they're doing. The cheese, the meats, the wines, everybody's like top of their field and whatever they're creating there. And that's a place you go to do that. There was something about them taking more time. So I think we brought our little rushy, have to get things done so we can go be productive attitude into a place where they're like, no, dinner takes 3 hours. Like, you're supposed to sit back and enjoy yourself, have a conversation, have a drink, have some dessert, lean into the people that you're with and the time you're spending together. I think that was one of the biggest things that I brought back. So what does it mean for Black folks to do that, to lean into the things that we need to center ourselves? We did a lot of ritual work and we did a lot of centering, and it was new for me to put myself at the center of my day. I'm always putting all the tasks I need to accomplish as the thing that's in the center and then working myself around that. But what does it mean to like center what I need? And I want to talk about this one moment that we had in the middle of the street, Alan, and it was, you brought it up. So we were trying to take a picture. So if you can imagine 12 Black people scrambling around in this intersection trying to take a picture. And, we were holding up cars and people were trying to walk by. And Alan was like, gosh, this is so embarrassing. And I was like, listen, we are about to be Black and take up this space. This is what this trip is about. What does it mean to get comfortable like with your people and in your Blackness and take up space? And I think for me, that recognition in that moment really summarized like the whole points of the thing. Like, can we bring that back here? Can we be comfortable like in our workspaces? Like, I have to go to City Hall a lot. City Hall is not a comfortable Black space for me, but can I go into City Hall in full possession of my Blackness and take up space? I don't know, but I'm drawing back on that feeling I had in that moment, and I'm trying to bring it into those places where I don't feel are safe, that it's safe to be Black.
I think that's brilliant. Thank you. Thanks for sharing. There's a lot to think about. What is it? Abundance, agency, and audacity. Those are three things that I think we all strive for in some ways. Although I think a lot of us, maybe not the audacity part, right? Because a lot of times we're afraid to be audacious. We want to fit in and we don't want to necessarily push it. We're taught to do that, right? That's part of the respectability framework, is to not be audacious in anything, not our hair, not our dress, not our speech. We're supposed to, assimilate. And I think audaciousness is the opposite of assimilation. I was always a person who found it difficult to assimilate. I was never like this person. I was always the square peg or the round peg or whatever it was in the square hole, whatever it was, I was the opposite. And over time, just stopped trying to fit in and just be myself, because I feel like there is this desire for people to be one way. I also think in Detroit, there's more than one Black experience. There's so many Black experiences, depending on what side of town, what profession, what church you belong to. Do you belong to church?
Donna, but I have to say that I feel like the list is short on what's acceptable, and you will get talked about and made fun of.
Oh, I agree. There's
the Black handbook of what is acceptable behavior.
I'm not disagreeing with that at all, but I am thinking that there's groups that don't accept each other inside of our community.
Oh,
and
sure.
There's people who feel safe in some spaces and other people who don't. Like there's some Black people who feel like City Hall is very safe for them. It's very comfortable for them. City Hall is designed for those types of people, and they've been there for a long time. There are some people who feel very safe in downtown Detroit, but I think most of us, there's just layers to it. Like one of the things I've been trying to do, work on with Eastside Community Network is trying to make sure the Eastside Community Network is safe for everybody on the East Side, not just for a certain type of person. And I'm not saying that we are ever intentionally not inviting to people, but I remember we were having this event and there was a question about music and what kind of music is acceptable. And these kids are listening to this bad music. These young people are listening to this bad music. And so my question is our organization safe for young people who listen to hip hop? Among people who think hip hop is inappropriate? And I think it's important for us to look at all of those different ways that we are inside of our community, because it looks to me like being an African immigrant is just another way of being Black in Detroit, that there's not necessarily this sense of connectedness. We're all in our own worlds to some extent.
Alan?
Yeah,
Listen, I grew up in Palmer Woods, and in Palmer Woods, I'm a Black person who grew up in Palmer Woods. And I promise you, Black people who grew up in Palmer Woods we're not accepting of a whole lot of other Black people.
Oh, I know.
That's ghetto, that's wealthy. This, that's that.
When I was at Country Day, the wealthy Black kids was a much more exclusive group than any of the wealthy white kid groups. Mm-hmm. It was much harder to hang out with those kids, and I could name names, than it would be to hang out with the white kids or the Jewish kids. The notion of like those kind of people was in full EFF, ECT.
So I think let's go back to Jeff Mills. And then I think if I can try to tie in this audacity piece, because I think it goes back, Lauren, to what you were saying about demanding more and expecting more, to be audacious and unapologetic about whatever shade or expression of Black you are. And Jeff Mills is amazing. One of the many gems he dropped was to elucidate something I think we all know, but okay, a city has a personality, and the way this personality of the city has an effect on you, the individual. Yes, you, the individual, make an imprint on a city, but the culture that you are embedding yourself in is really going to have an impact on you. And he used that to explain why, Germany, Berlin specifically, didn't work out so well for him. A great place to produce an idea, very efficient. There's a method to everything, right? But not so much a free thinking culture. I know it's a general statement, but just repeating what I said. Whereas, Paris is known as a romantic place, an expressive place. It's about art, writing, food, right? It's a Latin society, right? So I think there's a reason that many, during the time of the Harlem Renaissance, and then after, during Baldwin's time, folks were going to Paris, not to Berlin. You can, in case of Baldwin, be a gay Black man and thrive in a place like Paris. Is a cosmopolitan place, and I wonder, Lauren, if that's why you felt more connected across the diaspora there than you did in Detroit, because I didn't live it myself, but I have definitely heard some pretty rough stories about the African immigrant versus Black American divide here in Michigan. So, okay, just the last thing I'll say, going back to what you said, Lauren, we should be unapologetically ourselves. And then actually one of our travel mates, Leona Medley, she said it really well. Black is what we say it is. Okay, it doesn't have to fit a Palmer Park definition. It doesn't have to fit a Bewick definition. It is what we say it is. But I think there are certain environments, such as Paris, where it's a bit more cosmopolitan and pluralistic and accepting of the many ways that we express our Blackness.
Yeah. I think that's the ultimate draw, because you can go there and express your Blackness in a million different ways. And I might feel locked into a certain way of being Black in Detroit because I am of this place. But yeah, for a long time, I did not feel comfortable being Black in my way in this place.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like I'm like this person with no nation, right? Because I don't really fit with certain groups. And then I don't fit with these groups. I don't fit with these groups. I feel like I'm this traveler, you know, in the side of Detroit because I'm not a neat fit into any of the different groups. And it's largely because my upbringing, my grandmother being one way, my other grandmother being another way, and this push and pull and this feeling of connectedness in this one hand. It's the fact that you have to choose that makes it so difficult, I think, in Detroit. You have to choose which group you're going to belong to. And if you don't choose right, then you just don't get to belong, you know? And so that's been my lived experience. And I'm sure I'm not the only person. One of the things I think about, though, when I think about France is I interviewed this one young lady from France a few years ago for a job, and she is Algerian. And, you know, she was talking about how oppressive France was to Algerian people, not just immigrants, but Algerian people. And I remember a few years ago, Muslim people in sort of had a rebellion in France where they demanded that the French government be less oppressive to them. And somebody was saying to me the other day that perhaps the difference is a blue card rather, you know, the blue passport. Is the blue passport what gives you the power to be free in France? And if you don't have that, you know, is that?
Let me tell you about my retail experience. I was recounting this story to Jacqueline, who is one of the African immigrants in France. And she was like, that happened because you're an American. But it happened a couple of times where I would be in a store. It would just be me and the person working there. And they would have to go in the back to answer the phone or to find a size in something. And they would just leave me out front with all the merchandise. That never happens here. That never happens here. Nobody here would ever even like turn their back on my Black ass. But over there, they're like, oh, I'll be right back. I'm like, you just gonna leave me here with all your stuff? And she was like, well, that's because you were speaking English and you were obviously an American.
So what was the most influential thing that happened to you when you were there? What was the aha moment? This is whatever, the most influential thing that happened to you, Lauren?
I don't know that it happened while I was there. Something that happened like in the midst of planning and reflecting back on it. Like I did it myself. It's something that I was looking for all this like foundation support or some other organizations to help me put it together. Or, you know, I was like just waiting for like some kind of outside help to put the thing together, but I just did it and it was fine. So I was like, oh, I can just do stuff. I don't have to wait.
You found your agency and your audacity, huh?
Yes, I did.
You're thriving.
Yes. And let me think a little more on what happened while we were there. I want to hear yours, Alan. What's the thing?
Yeah, it's so hard to put it into just one moment.
I'll just name a few then.
Yeah, I think, okay, I reserve the right to come back to this question because it's a good one.
All right.
But I will say, I mean, I've been speaking a little bit about the contrast between the US and France, and I think that's been very illuminating. But there's both, you know, like if you compare the difference between La Negritude and the American sense of Pan-Africanism, they're very different. Like Pan-Africanism, you could argue, you could critique, is based off of a idealized image of like what Africa is like, or, you know, what we aspire it to be, right? Whereas, you know, La Negritude is, you know, largely the, you know, Caribbean and African, you know, diaspora under French control, you know, experiencing sort of, you know, France or the hexagon, the name for France. So it's much more of a lived experience as opposed to like okay, America hates us, maybe we should go back to Africa, or like adopt, African culture. So I don't know, it's just sort of things like that. I've already spoken about color blindness, and the sense of race. Like it was fascinating to learn about your own country's construct around race by seeing how it operates in a different country.
Did you see our country's contributions around race in France? Did you see how who we are as a people in the United States influence Black identity or the culture in France, or no?
Yeah, I would say one example of that was in Chateau Rouge, or AKA Barbès, AKA Little Africa. A lot of that. So that's sort of, a Black immigrant neighborhood, but also a fashion district. And there was one particular boutique. It's called, what is it? Sorry. Oh yeah, Maison Chateau Rouge. And their aesthetic was to combine West African prints. They had some like mud cloth, they had some wax, and that was paired with street culture. So you'd see some typography, some graphics overlaid on that. So it was kind of like a mashup of the fabrics and the cuts that were like, indigenous to these immigrants who were coming from a place like Senegal or Cameroon, but borrowing the American kind of street style aesthetic and sort of plastering that onto it.
Cool. Lauren, what about you? Did you see yourself or our culture at all when you were there? Anything significant?
Maybe it doesn't stand out in my head because I wasn't looking for it. I was looking for the other, trying to understand the other. I don't know. I just saw the African influences everywhere. It made me really want to get to the continent.
Wow. Yeah, I really, really want to go to the continent. But, when you look at Josephine Baker, how did people receive? Were they excited about her being honored in that way?
Well, the streets were full of people. If you could imagine. So when you see those crowds of people, like for the I Have a Dream speech, people all spread out along the mall. So crowds not that big, but around the monument of the Pantheon, there were just, thrones and thrones of people. But I did see a guy who had a sign. I couldn't tell what it said. So I asked this woman who was kind of interpreting it for me. So there was someone there protesting, putting her in there. And I imagine that might not be an uncommon sentiment. She's not a French person. And I think that if you were to ask French citizens who would be against her going in the Pantheon, why, they would say because she's not born French. They might be thinking because she's Black, but they would say because she's not a French-born person. But there were, like I said, a few thousand people out there in support, watching, cheering. What was also interesting, though, is that we didn't send a delegate. There was nobody from the United States in that building participating in that ceremony, like representing us there, which I thought was strange. Like, it's a huge honor to go, traditionally to go into that place, and we didn't send any representation.
That's very disappointing,
isn't it? And I also just asked the question, like, would the United
Embassy?
Would we ever honor a Black person in that way if we had the capacity and had a monument that was as revered and highly regarded? Would we honor Black citizens in that way? I don't know.
Oh, that's
actually question. One of our tour guides asked us the question, is Kevy, right? He says, does America have something like the Pantheon? And we're like, well, we have the Arlington Cemetery. So I guess, does that mean that we most revere our military, patriots, as opposed to, our, cultural or artistic? Well,
she is the first entertainer in the Pantheon as well.
So
she's in there because she's a war hero. She was a spy for the French resistance.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's true. But that wasn't mentioned, but Macron didn't mention that. He didn't say anything about that she was heavy in the American civil rights movement or that she was a spy in the resistance.
Well, we have our own Harriet Tubman who should be honored then, because she was a spy, wasn't she, for the Union forces? So, but we're still trying to figure it out. Can you describe what the Pantheon is?
A monument where France puts its important dead people. So lots of people are in there ceremoniously, like Josephine Baker's remains aren't in there. Her family wanted them to stay in Monaco. Toussaint Louverture's the remains aren't in there. He's in there, they do a ceremony. You'll get a plaque. Like I took a tour of it on my last day there to go inside and, really feel it out. There are tombs in the basement where some people are, like Dumas is down there. Marie Curie is down there. Lots of their, the other luminaries are actually in the tomb, but the rest is, it's a monument with, giant paintings like the one behind you, but, period. It kind of, for a sense of feel, it looks like the DIA with a tomb in the basement.
Well, you're on the board of the Wright Museum. Congratulations.
I am now.
Yeah. So you're representing those of us who are on the Community Advisory Council on the board. And you've done such a great job leading and chairing that initiative, which has not been an easy job, I would imagine.
I was just going to say it's tough. It's tough.
But I see change afoot, and that's your leadership. Is that something that the right should undertake, or we should undertake on our own behalf to create our own pantheon, or is equivalent to house our people?
Let me tell you this. So my friend Tanya Stevens, who brought to my attention, and it blew my mind, that there are no monuments to Black people in Detroit except for the Slave Monument and the Joe Louis Fist. But all the monuments we have around are to these white men who meant something to this place. But in a city that's currently 80% Black, we have but a slave monument that reflects us back to ourselves. So what would it mean for us to get a monument for somebody that we revere? And the list could go on of like who that should be.
Or we could put them all over the place, right?
The fact that we don't have any in this 80% Black city.
And see, we name things after people, but we don't build monuments to them. So the name loses meaning over time. I would love to have us think of some type of ceremonial something and creating some type of monument on the grounds of the museum that would allow us to honor our greats.
I love this, Donna. Is the Child Stage right about to be our pantheon, our Black
pantheon? It should be, right? It should be. I mean, that's what we have. And it's important to me that we understand the uniqueness of having that museum in the city, and the museum kind of lives up to its promise, because it's not there yet, right? It's becoming what it's going to be, but it's not there yet. When I hear about Josephine Baker being honored in that way, and it goes back to an earlier comment about whether or not we can ever expect ourselves to be honored like that by our government, but we can honor ourselves and each other. So I get excited about that. Alan, you're about to do a study on the east side of Detroit, right?
Oh, well, we've done a couple studies, and they're now implementing, the recommendations and the requests from residents.
Well, I'm thinking through the study associated with Stellantis, formerly FCA.
Oh, the Connor Creek.
The Connor Creek study. Yes.
That is set to launch next year when we get back from the holiday.
All right. I'm excited about that. And I'm excited because you have been to France and you've looked at the Pantheon and you've looked at our culture, and you're working with Lauren on the Institute for Afro-Urbanism. And I'm wondering if there's any way for you to incorporate some of your findings, some of the aha moments into the planning of our community, which is, still a very, very, very high percentage of Black people, much more than 80%, more like 95% and up.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I think asking for more and demanding more is, having that audacity, I think, is important to get to a place where we are thriving. And, I don't think that there's any deficit of that actually in the greater Connor Creek area. If anybody attended the community benefits annual update meeting, you heard Jay Henderson, shout out to Riverbend. He was like, we don't need to do a planning study. We've been telling you all along, like we want grants to fix up our houses. We already have an application list. Like, let's just do it. Like, don't pay some consultants to get to a conclusion. Like we're telling you right now. And
well,
like,
I think that's was met with dispute though, because I heard about that. I was not able to attend from some of my friends who were there who felt like, wait a minute, there's other things.
Sure.
Yeah.
And we will do a plan. I think that type of audacity to demand something from your government is important. And that's part of a healthy civic discourse. And I hope that Mr. Henderson's neighbors will also say like, hey, actually, hold on a second. We want to think about these other things too. That's why we do a planning process.
Yeah, because I've had people calling me up over the past year who have other ideas of things they want to do. And they say, okay, how are we going to spend that $800,000 that is with Invest Detroit? I have this idea. And it's like, okay, you're going to go through a study so that this idea can be prioritized. There's a lot of brilliance on the east side of Detroit. Home repair is, I mean, you're not going to fix the homes in this community with that pot of money. Although, you know, home repair is my passion, but it's just not a large enough pot to really make that huge dent in there. We're going to need the city to dedicate more funds or a new process for generating funds for home repair if we're going to make life livable for the people in our community.
Absolutely. And it's I'm really encouraged that folks like Jay and others are speaking up and have not, given up or fallen into cynicism, but are expecting and demanding that their government serve them. And whether you want X, Y, or Z, we just want you at the table saying what you want, and we'll figure out where the common ground and the public good is. And that's what we're trying to get.
Yeah, I hope also that we invest some of those funds to capture and retain and hold on to some of that culture. Rhonda Theus, who is another member of the NAC, has been working on Brewer Park and building out Brewer Park, and has a statue of a young Black man in Brewer Park that I can't remember the name of the statue, but you see so much innovation. When you look on Manistee, you have really the Innovation Drive. I call it the Innovation Drive because you have Feed 'em Freedom there. You have their, I think I get the numbers wrong, but 287 Culture Hub, which is a house they improved. You've got the grocery store, the neighborhood grocery store that Raphael Wright is building. You have the Tree House, and you have Detroit of Bloom. Lots of projects. Tammy Black. Tammy Black, lots of projects that could use investment from these funds, these innovation projects. People have put their money to work, and I just would love to see those people who've already been doing the work have the opportunity to see their ideas materialize. They've had the audacity. They've got the agency. We just need some abundance, right? So I want to be using those words. You have no idea, Lord. You need to stop the AAA. I got it. No, I'm really excited about this. Lauren, are you going to be doing any more excursions as an annual thing? And if you do, is there a way for people to join you on your excursions?
That's a good question. Yes, I definitely want to do more. And I had thought about like doing different groups of people every year, but now I'm kind of into the idea of keeping the same group of people and seeing like how powerful that constellation can become.
Okay. All right. All right. So I think that's all I have. When are we going to see more from the Institute for Afro-Urbanism?
Well, in January, I'm going to launch a research study. So the Black Thriving Index, which seeks to identify an actual set of criteria that Black folks need in order to thrive. So if you can imagine, lots of our indicators now are very quantitative, but it'll be 100% qualitative analysis of what Black folks need in order to thrive. So there'd be a fellow in each of the SNF neighborhoods and the North End that would have conversations with their family members and community members around what they have needed in order to activate their agency, abundance, and audacity. And then we can get a common set of criteria. And in theory, anyone doing a project in those neighborhoods could measure what they're doing against that set of criteria.
Awesome. Okay, well, congratulations. Do you have a physical location, or are you going to be kind of working from home?
I do not. I fantasize about a particular location in the North End. I think the North End is I don't know, going to be ground central for a cultural revolution. So I want to live there. I want my institute to be there. So I don't have a space, but I have a neighborhood.
Yeah, but I'll tell you, I was the first executive director of Vanguard Community Development
Okay.
Corporation from 1999 until 2007. So to say that I've got some roots there and I got some folks there, and it has always been a beautiful place, with people, a great deal of history. I remember we did a planning study with Wayne State, and they pulled out this plat map, and they showed us that the neighborhood just to the south of us was Milwaukee Junction on this plat map. And so we said, let's start calling it Milwaukee Junction. And now you see Milwaukee Junction is the hottest thing. We had a Milwaukee Junction small business center back in the day. And I think that the North End is finally getting its due. It's super important. We've got a lot of beautiful housing there, a lot of really good people and a great history. And I think that's a great place for you to belong. So congratulations, really excited about your work. So I think this wraps up our conversation today. If you have topics that you want to discuss on Authentically Detroit, you can hit us up on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Authentically Detroit, or email us at authenticallydetroit@gmail.com. So do you have anybody you want to shout out? We usually close the day shouting people out, honoring them for what they've done.
Well, I want to shout out Lauren Hood for making this possible and gathering such a group and just pulling it all together. I think it was very impactful for everybody on the trip, if I can speak for everyone. So yeah, thank you, Lauren.
Thanks, Alan. Let me shout out the people that went. Help me if I forget people. Liana Medley, Sharina Sharp, Chase Morris, Chase Cantrell, Will Butler, Kaylin Waterman, Imani Mixon, Faya,
Orlando.
Orlando Bailey.
Did you get Tafari?
And Tafari Stevenson Howard. Yes.
Is that everybody?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And if we missed anybody, charge the mind, not the heart.
Exactly.
Amazing group, amazing work. Let me shout out a couple people on our end. I want to shout out Joel Harani Harris, who has been working with us and who served as a panelist on the Eastside Summit that we did last week. I'd like to shout out Jami Tata, who was the opening poet. He's always so amazing. And now Jami, real quickly, he was in the youth group, the Spot Teen Center, when I was at Vanguard. So I met him when he was 15 years old, and to see him now, it's just always great.
He's full circle in the North End because he has a bookstore over there now, right?
Well, absolutely, yeah. He stayed and he invested, and I'd like to believe that some of what we did with them mattered. But also Dominique Ball Davis was another poet, and we had the People's Poet there. We had a number of Katrina, I can't think of her last name. I don't know, Watkins, I believe. Kind of having a brain freeze. From the Bailey Park Project came and spoke to our people, and Sierra O'Leary came out and spoke. So many other people came out, and I want to thank them for all that they poured into the community during our Eastside Summit. Hopefully you can be connected to our Eastside Summit next year. It was kind of an exciting day. It was a long day, but we talked a lot about sustainability issues and how to make our community more sustainable in a lot of different fronts. People got a lot out of it. So thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you also for listening, and catch the wave.